I'm Marty Lenzini, retired Marine Corps colonel. I've spent 26 years in the Marine Corps. I was qualified in the A4, A6, A7, F4, and EA6B. My combat airplane was the A4 airplane. I was in Vietnam 68 and 69, where I flew 350 combat missions. And during that time was awarded 4 Distinguished Flying Crosses and 24 Air Medals. Uh, that was the only combat I saw while I was in the Marine Corps. But I spent 25 years in the Marine Corps. I was fortunate enough to command a squadron as a major and a Marine aircraft group as a colonel. I retired, went to work for Hughes Aircraft Company, and continued to do the work that I've done in the service and in the Corps. And that was air-to-ground weapons in development, Maverick, paveways, and weapons like that. And that's what brought me to Tucson here. I am a member of the Distinguished Flying Cross Society, president of the Tucson chapter here, and also on the National Board of Directors.
Okay. And actually, this is a great thing to ask, especially you. What, and many people don't know, what is the Distinguished Flying Cross awarded for?
Okay, Distinguished Flying Cross is awarded for heroism in aerial flight. It's the fourth highest award. It's above a Bronze Star and right below the Silver Star. And there were about, I think, some 4,000 awarded during the Vietnam era, among all services: Air Force, Navy, Marine Corps, and Army.
Okay. Well, that's good. Going back to your first experiences in pilot training, did you go through Pensacola or where did you?
Yes, I went through Pensacola. I was unusual. I had no history in the service. My grandparents came over from Italy. Neither my grandparents were in the service. My dad worked at a defense factory building tanks during World War II, so he was not in the war. And I had no idea that I'd end up in the service. That wasn't something that I looked forward to. And what happened, I went to a Catholic high school, St. George High School, in near Chicago, Evanston, Illinois. And the counselor came and said, "Here, I have scholarship here you can apply for." And it was the NROTC scholarship. So I applied for that, was accepted, and went through the University of New Mexico in the Navy NROTC unit, took my commission in the Marine Corps.
Okay. And was there one conversation you had with your mom and dad, or something that made you say, "Yeah, I'm gonna do this. I'm gonna get into the military to fly," or was there a person that did that? Your counselor you mentioned.
Well, I was fearless when I was young. I used to climb on roofs of houses. When I was in high school, I had to take the train and the elevated to my high school, St. George High School. And what I used to do, while we were waiting for the train, we used to jump on top of the L station, ride on top of the L's from station to station. Now, at that time, I didn't know it, but I think that was a dormant fighter pilot gene that arose. So I did get into the Marine Corps, and every Marine's a rifleman. And I think that's why Marine Corps does the best close air support in the world. We spend our first 6 months in the Corps together with our brethren learning ground tactics and learning how the ground pounders think. And it was during one of these, I think, 600-yard fire maneuver that I was on during the basic school, running up and down the hills. And I rolled over and saw 2 jets fly over, and I said, "Yeah, I think that's what I want to do." And so I applied for flight training, passed the physical and the eye test, and went through Pensacola. All Marine Navy aviators go through Pensacola.
And I'm asking the next question as though there's a 22-year-old, 21-year-old wannabe pilot that's here would like to be a pilot. At what point were you in your flight training when you felt like, man, this may be too much for me? This is too much. How did you overcome that? And maybe you never really felt like that, but what drove you to get through this and to do well? This is not something where you just get B's and C's and pass like in college. This is let's excel. What drove you?
I think once I started flying, I really liked it and I really took to it. And I was focused on being the best that I could be. And I think that's what got me through flight school. I was fortunate. The Marine Corps really teaches innovation and leadership. I got a funny story I relate. My first squadron, mostly lieutenants. Our skipper had flown F-4U Corsairs, and he was pushing us to fly, take at least one cross country a month. So there were four first lieutenants, four of us. I was a junior first lieutenant, but we're all new. We figured we're the best pilots. We're going on a cross country. Skipper called us in the office. He says, "Now, guys, don't embarrass me." We said, "No, sir." So we thought we were, you know, right up there. We were pretty damn good pilots. So our routine was the guy that led the flight would change each destination with a different guy would lead. The guy that led the flight did the flight plan. One guy would check the weather. One guy would fuel the jets, and one guy would check the NOTAMs. So we're going across country as we normally did, leave out of Cherry Point, North Carolina, and ending up in El Toro, California, a garden spot back in those days. So we're going into NAS Dallas. We call a break, and George happened to be leading this flight. And they say, "Be advised, NAS Dallas is notarized as closed. What are your intentions?" And he says, "We're going to land." So we land. All four of us put on our 4.5 caps. We're standing there. In rolls Navy staff car. Out steps a Navy captain. He says, "Who's leading this flight?" We all point to George over there who's leading this flight. And he looks, he says, "What? 4 Marine lieutenants? You mean your skipper let you 4 fly together?" We said, "Yes, sir." He shook his head and said, "No wonder." Turned around, walked away.
That's hilarious. And which aircraft was that in?
Huh?
Which aircraft were you?
That was the A4.
Okay,
That was
A4. Okay.
that was my first airplane.
Okay.
That was my first squadron, as a matter of fact. We're still getting together.
That's very cool. No, the A4. So you're the first A4 pilot I have ever had a chance to really talk to. Will you describe what the A4 was like to you as a plane to fly? How did you feel about that? Every plane has personality. What was the A4's personality?
You wore it. It was small. My shoulders just about touched the cockpit. It was part of you. And it was very maneuverable, especially in its role as air to ground. Especially in Vietnam. There were times when I had rolled in on a target and the air was full of tracers and you could almost reach out and touch them. And on one of these missions, there was 3 gun pits. There were 23 millimeters in these pits and a line of trees. This is a mission we were on, and there wasn't supposed to be any enemies there. We were waiting to hit a cache of supplies, but the FAC couldn't get permission to hit that because it was in the Army's area of operation, and they had lost a platoon. They didn't know where they were, so they didn't want us to hit it. So this is just after twilight. It was dark on the ground, getting dark in the sky. We've been orbiting for a half hour. And the FAC says, "Wow, what the hell? There's these 3 gun pits here. Let's just blow them up so the NVA can't come in and take them." This is up in northern I Corps. So I'm leading the flight. I roll in. As soon as I put my nose at the ground, those 3 gun pits erupted. There were tracers around my airplane, tree lined. All you saw was white specks. And your heart jumps in your throat because I'm not expecting this. I think I'm on a milk run. So I focus and I hit one gun pit and destroy it. My wingman's smart enough While they're all focused on me, he breaks off, comes in the other way. He gets the second gun pit. I come around and get the third one, and then we hose the tree line. But when we got back to the base, we're in the bar, he says, I couldn't see your airplane. There's so many traces about it. I don't know how they missed you. And they missed me because the A4 is a fairly small airplane, and it wasn't my time to die. But
So you had some guardian angels working overtime for you.
yeah, I did, and I think that's why you want to be a young pilot in combat. I was fearless. My squadron mates, we never worried about dying. We worried about completing the mission. The focus was on the mission.
And then I've always been curious about this. You see tracers coming up at you when you're flying the aircraft. Does that mean you're now turning to focus on your airspeed and the aim point, put the thing on the thing to fire? Or are you actively trying to maneuver?
No. You're after that first horror, you focus on the target and you do what you're going to do. The A4 didn't have an automatic release system. Your automatic release system was your head. You had a mill setting on the gun sight, altitude, airspeed, and release altitude were your components to put the bomb on the target. This particular mission, we had slicks, 250-pound slicks. So, yeah, I focused on one of those gun pits, and everything else I didn't think about. And I think this is true of naval aviators. They got an ability to compartmentalize. So when you're up on a mission, you forget everything around you. You forget what's happening on the ground. You forget what's happening in your family. You're focused on getting the job done.
And my last question on this attack, how did that affect you the next day? Did you have any thoughts? Probably just a little bit, and then you went out and just flew. I mean, because you flew how many? 350?
350
Where
combat
was that
missions.
in your string of all these missions? Is that early on, or?
No, that was fairly. That was in '69, probably fairly late. No, and it was just, to me, it was another mission. I had several missions like that, especially the ones I got my DFCs on. But it was another mission, and I felt like I did my job, and I was ready to go out the next day. And that's why I think it helps if you're a young pilot in combat.
Yeah. Will you tell me about one of your DFC missions?
Okay, and there is no such thing as a DFC mission. DFC mission is a normal mission that turns into, as we say, a shit sandwich. In other words, you got bad weather, you may have troops in contact, you have to put your airplane in harm's way to accomplish a mission. One of these was like that mission I described. The weather was bad. We're in northern I Corps. There is an Army battalion pinned down by a 20 millimeter or 23 millimeter, whatever the NVA had, and they're back up in the mountains. They're on the high ridge. The weather's shitty, so I'm at 400 feet. I had snake eyes, which were 250-pound retarded bombs. So I'm flying at 400 feet. I'm flying right down the gun line, and again tracers are going, and I dropped two of them. One landed right in the pit, and the battalion was able to advance. That was a DSC mission.
Yeah. And when you were coming down with these snake eyes to release, did you carry like 3 on each side, so 6, or how many? How did you?
We carried 8 of those, 4 on each side, and I probably released a stick of 4 on that one pass. Yeah.
Okay. And then I'm always curious about, what are you hearing in your aircraft at that time? Will you describe, is it a loud engine with radio calls going off of 2 radios, or what are you hearing in the aircraft when you're flying these?
I mean, you hear the FAC. I'm working with the FAC. We couldn't talk to the ground. We didn't have a radio to talk to the ground. So you hear the FAC, and the engine, you've heard it forever. I mean, it becomes part of you. The A4 at that point, I probably had over 1,000 hours in the A4, so it was second nature. You learn how to maneuver the airplane to put your bombs on target.
And then pretend like I'm a lieutenant or a young captain. I've just shown up in Vietnam to fly with you guys. I've joined your squadron, which I don't know if that would happen or not. But
Yes,
what
it.
advice would you, who's been flying there for a while, what at that time would you have told me about flying in Vietnam? What would you advise me, mentor me on?
Well, yeah, it's the fact of the matter is, this is something you're trained to do. You did it in peacetime. It's not that much different in wartime, other than they're shooting back. Uh, just focus on the job. Listen to your leader. I mean, you brief before each flight, uh, and do your job. Do what you were trained to do.
Yeah, that's the best advice. Just do what you know to do. Uh, After you left Vietnam, what did you come back to and fly or work on after that?
Okay, this is a great story because I was stationed at Point Magoo, NAS Point Magoo, and test operations air-to-ground weapons branch, and we were doing test and development on air-to-ground weapons. So in that air-to-ground weapons branch, we had an A4M, we had a TA4F, we had an A7B, an A7E, and an A6B. So you end up flying all those airplanes. So this is a test space. So you just didn't fly one airplane. You flew all those, and I also ended up flying the F4 with VX4, which is also a test squadron. So those 3 years were probably the best 3 years flying, other than combat in Vietnam. Now, obviously, that was more rewarding because you saved guys on the ground and you did your job. But um, that was a very good career. That's what got me very interested in air to ground weapons and test and development. Uh, I went on to further in my career to go to the OpNav and be a development coordinator for air to ground weapons and airplanes, AV-8B, Laser Maverick, things like that. So that's kind of been tenure of my tour. But the ability to fly different airplanes. One month I flew 5 different airplanes in the same month in my logbook. You can only do that at a test base.
Yeah, yeah, that's pretty special.
Yeah.
And then the E6B, right? E6.
Yeah, it was a B because it was a special airplane. Uh, what had happened? Air Force says wild weasels. Okay, the Navy was looking at making an A6 a wild weasel. So we had all these sensors on the nose. And what we did is take a ship missile, a standard missile, and we hung it on that airplane, and it was going to be the Navy's wild weasel. In fact, I fired the first standard missile off an airplane in one of these tests. And what it would home on radar signals. So you're flying, if there's a radar over here, you launch that missile, you could direct it to, make a 90-degree or a 60-degree turn, go after that radar site. So we did these tests at White Sands, New Mexico, and the White Sands test range there. Another very interesting, I sunk a destroyer off San Clemente Island. And what we're doing, the Walleye 2 data link, it was a test of the data link. It's one where you could guide it all the way in. They wanted to see if a pilot could drop the weapon and then do an escape maneuver, fly the airplane, still fly the weapon. So I flew the weapon. I hit within a foot of the X on the ship. So it was a successful test, but it was so successful it sunk the destroyer. They didn't mean to do that. I guess the Walleye 2 was 2,000-pound weapon, and it was put in the right spot. But those are the kind of things you did test community. Great. That was a great tour.
And so you did the test sorties, your 3-year tour there, and then what did you follow on to?
Okay, um, I went to Yuma where we had the A4 training squadron. So I was the operations officer of the A4 training squadron. I'm still a major. I was a major in Vietnam, but a temporary major. Uh, I was really a captain with gold Oakleys on. You know how the promotions were in Vietnam. So I really wasn't a real major, but I was wearing the gold Oakley. So I'm the OPSO of the training squadron for a year, and then I became the CO of an A4 tactical squadron that was there. Again, my tour at Yuma or at Point Magoo really helped me out. There's an ACMR at Yuma, and at this time there were no A4s that carried an ACMR pod. So I went back to my contacts. I said, "Give me a walleye cable on one end, sidewinder fittings on the other, so I could hang an ACMR pod on the A4s in my squadron." So with this special cable, we were the only A4 squadron to carry an ACMR pod. So we did a lot of ACM. In fact, we had 9 ACTIs, Air Combat Tactics Instructors. So we did a lot of work. In fact, VX4 was working on tactics with an Agile missile. An Agile missile was a forerunner of the AIM-9X. They wanted very experienced ACM guys to come and work against. So I deployed 5 airplanes over there, and we went ahead and worked with VX4 on the forerunner of the AIM-9X. High off bore sight. Yeah.
Yeah. And I carried Maverick laser and pods designated, so you probably were on the front end of that. Let's say we're walking up to an A4 and you're standing in front of your beloved. Is that what? Let me ask you this: what is your aircraft?
Yeah, it has to be the A4.
Okay, yeah.
I mean, it survived combat with me, and I've had more hours in it than any other airplane.
Okay. So if a young person was walking up in front of this A4, how would you introduce your aircraft to that person? How would you describe your aircraft to that person?
Well, in its day, it was the best close air support airplane in the Marine Corps, and I think in any of the services. It was agile, it was small, it was fun to fly. You didn't have to be real careful in it. I mean, you can get yourself in very weird. I've been straight up, 0 airspeed, slide down on the tail, flame coming in through the inlets. The airplane just flops down one way or the other. I mean, it's a fun airplane to fly, and it was maneuverable. So you didn't, if you're on a bombing mission, you had to hit an altitude, airspeed, and dive angle. But in your head, you had your own little computer, and if you're high or you're low, you're off. You can feed it so much rudder to overcorrect to get the bomb on the target, because the airplane is very maneuverable. Couldn't do that in an F4. I mean, I flew the F4D. F4 is big, stable. You got to be set up for a bombing run to make that happen. You couldn't make a lot of last minute changes like you could in a A4.
So going into Vietnam, if you had to go right now, you'd pick between an F4 and an A4.
Oh, an A4, definitely.
Okay, yeah. Good. Well, I'm glad I could finally meet and talk to an A4 guy. I mean, they seem so small. I mean, what was the fuel load? I mean, how long was it? At 1.5, kind of 1.7?
Your typical mission 1.7. You had 5,400 pounds internal. In combat, we carried a 300-gallon tank, another 2,000 pounds.
Okay.
So you had 74 pounds, and then you had two stations for weapons.
Okay.
I mean, I was involved in the A4 later on in my career. I had a Marine Air Group And in that air group, we had A4Ms, we had A6E trams, EA6Bs, OA4Ms, which are the two-seat Takafaka, and I even had a Navy A7 squadron attached to my air group, VA 105, which is, and of course I had flown the A7 at Point Magoo, so it was not new to me.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, and then you're here in a red Friday Pilot shirt and a jacket. Will you tell me what is the Friday Pilot group to you? Why are you a member of the?
Oh, I tell you, it's the greatest bunch of guys ever. If you need anything, these men will do anything for each other. The camaraderie there is just wonderful. I mean, yes, every Friday we have lunch, we drink a beer, we tell lies, we tell stories, but the camaraderie and the togetherness is just, you know, it's nice growing old knowing that I have these guys that would do anything for me, just like I'd do anything for any of them.
And then on the outside of the jacket, you have some patches. Will you mind pointing? Give me a little tour of your
Okay,
jacket there, and I'll focus on the camera while you do that.
okay. Most of them are in the back. Obviously, the airplanes I flew, there's a patch of a A7. Uh, oh, there's my F4 patch. Obviously, I flew an F4. What is it? This is what's this? A DFC patch?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
Oh, that's the DFC patch, and then on the other side, that's a squadron I was in Vietnam, VMA 211, the Wake Island Avengers, and then on the back, I think there's more patches. Obviously, okay, that was a squadron I commanded at Yuma, VMA 223, VMA 214, the Black Sheep. That squadron is a squadron I went to as refresher training before I went to Vietnam. I was in my first squadron. I got orders to the Naval Postgraduate School, Aeronautical Engineering, and I was there for 3 years. Leaving there, I went to the Black Sheep to requalify. I had 2 months there. I got 110 hours in 2 months, and then was on my way to Vietnam.
Okay.
And the reason was at that time the Marine Corps was doing a lot of transition helicopter pilots into jets because the helicopter pilots were going over Vietnam more than the fixed wing pilots. And this squadron commander, who was later had the wing of the air group I took over, he needed help. When I walked into the door, me and another guy says, "Oh boy, real A4 pilots, I need your help." And so my second mission, I was leading the night in-flight refueling mission. So he relied heavily on a couple of us that had been in an A4 squadron previously because he had a lot of new pilots that were transitioned from helicopters. So that was that was a fun 2 months.
What were you refilling off of the 135?
No, we refueled off the KC 130.
Okay.
Yeah, and in my first squadron, we made 2 transplants to Rota, Spain, from Cherry Point. Also on the KC 130s.
Okay.
Mm,
All
yeah.
right. Let me see the back one more time. Let's see.
Okay.
See on the right. What is that? The 533.
Yeah, that's my first squadron, VMA 533.
Okay.
That's what started it all.
Okay.
And that's what a skipper that gave us our head, let us run.
That's the one that let 4 lieutenants go.
Yeah, that was the 4 lieutenants, and many stories like that. But it was a learning experience.
Very cool.
Taught you leadership and innovation. Believe me.
That's cool. And let me see one more time. The last patch is the middle.
Oh, that's the A4 is forever.
Okay. Skyhawk
Yeah,
Association.
A4 is forever.
Perfect. That's great. Okay. Good. All right. You can take a seat back there again. And let's make sure we're focused here. Here we go. Good, perfect. Almost there. And let's see, let me check the time, make sure I'm being diligent on time. Good, 11:12.
Oh, you're good.
Good, good. Okay, good.
I got here early, so you gave you a
Yeah.
break.
No, that's great. That's perfect. Uh, the area I wanted to kind of hone in on as we close the interview part is American fighter aviation, Marine Corps fighter aviation, probably the pinnacle. I can't believe I'm saying this as an Air Force. Probably the pinnacle of being a fighter pilot. You're self-contained. You're a rifleman first. You know the guys on the ground intimately, so you're fighting for them in a very personal way.
You have that bond. That's special.
Yeah. What would you say it is about that brotherhood that makes it special? How would you describe that to me?
Well, the Marines. I'm in the Marines because the Marines are the best. I was in an NROTC. The best officer instructor there in the unit was a Marine. That's why 6 of the top 7 guys in our graduating class took the Marine option instead of going to the Navy, because he was the best and we wanted to be the best. I mean, the Marine Corps, it does away with a lot of bullshit. Uh, you're not black, you're not white, you're not yellow, you're green. All Marines are green, and you work together and you live and die for one another. The training is excellent. That's why you have to learn to be a ground officer before you fly. I fired every weapon we had back in those days in the ground corps. Threw hand grenades, fired bazookas. That kind of stuff. It instills with you a pride and something special. It's always special to get together with Marine brethren, even to this day.
Yeah, and maybe that's a little bit what carries into your fighter pilot group, where, in the sense that people are going to work for each other, they're going to support each other. Is that an aviation community thing, or is that?
Yeah, I think it's a whole Marine Corps thing. The purpose of aviation is to support the troops on the ground. That's what I was taught. I mean, we have the ground troops, we got logistics, we got aviation. Together, that's the Marine Corps, and we work together. The focus of the Marine Corps is still on the guy on the ground, and that's what you're taught.
Yeah, yeah. And then in closing, if you were to give a piece of advice to today's fighter pilots, F-35, F-22. I know the Marines are big F-35 guys.
Yeah, they are.
If you were to sit them down before they go out and deal with a global threat, Russian, Chinese, whatever it may be, what advice would you sit down across the table from them and say, look, here's what you need to do, here's what you need to remember?
It's a different world. They'll never they'll you'll never do close air support like we did in Vietnam. You're never going to get that close to the enemy. These airplanes today are so sophisticated, and they can do so much more. That F-35 it's just a tremendous airplane. Situational awareness. You know where everyone is, where the good guys are, where the bad guys are. Stealthy, great airplane, but the mission's still the same. You train to do the mission, whatever that mission is. You have to focus on the mission to get it done, just like I did when I was in Vietnam.
And do you have an opinion on the RPA, or drones, as they're called, coming in and stuff? I just heard Elon Musk at the Air Force convention say drones are the future, artificial intelligence the future. It's a loaded question, of course, but
There,
what's your opinion?
there will be a lot of that. There will be more, but uh, you're asking me if the need for a manned airplane will go away. I don't think so. Uh, um, no matter how smart your artificial intelligence is, uh, you can't account for everything, and that's why you get put into situations you're trained to take care of things like that. So yes, there's going to be a lot of them. There will be a lot of unmanned airplanes, and a lot of unmanned airplanes will be wingmen going on a strike. They may clear corridors for other airplanes to go in, but still, uh, you learn the mission. You learn your airplane first, obviously, what it can do, what it can't do, and what that mission is, and that's what you focus on.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Like people saying that the F4 doesn't need a gun. It's like we believe we'll need a gun, but sure enough,
Well, you were right, as it turns out. The Navy airplanes didn't have a gun. Air Force F4s did. Uh, Obviously, in Vietnam, you needed a gun. Every airplane needed a gun.
yeah, yeah, that's true. Um, okay, and then in closing, if you will just reintroduce yourself, I like to get at the front at the end, and then tell me what is the best thing about aviation. So your name and what is the thing you love the most about flying.
Again, my name, Marty Lenzini, retired Marine Colonel, A4, F4, A6, A7 pilot. And believe me, what I loved about aviation was flying, being up there, being your own boss, and working in conjunction with the big plan. But uh, I had a great career in the Marine Corps. I wouldn't, I wouldn't give it up for anything. It probably kept me out of jail. As I say, we were talking about your career.
Yeah.
I say I love the Marine Corps, and I think it made me a better person. Relationships I had uh, to this day, I could go back and see those guys. And for example, we had an A4 reunion November a year ago in Pensacola. This squadron, VMA 211, we had a lunch. I hadn't seen those guys in 50 years, and it was just like I saw them yesterday. It was old home week, and getting together with those guys was just tremendous.
Yeah. And actually, I forgot. Let me, if I may ask,
Okay.
also, you're in Tucson,
Yes.
and you mentioned that was through your work as a civilian afterward that brought you to Tucson or kept you in Tucson. Um, what was that follow-on work you mentioned with Hughes?
I worked for Hughes Aircraft Company, and I was a project manager, program manager, worked in some black programs, and air-to-ground weapons, Maverick, for example, Paveway, things like that. Very active in when NATO expanded, and we got all those Central European countries now buying U.S. airplane, U.S. weapons, integrating weapons on like for the L159 Czech Republic airplane. We integrated Maverick, Paveway, and Sidewinder on that aircraft. But a lot of work there. Laser Maverick was a great weapon, and the Air Force didn't buy it originally. That was a Navy Marine Corps weapon.
What was that? I think it was the K. Anyways, yeah, I remember
It,
the
it,
whole.
it was, and I was actually instrumental when I was a development coordinator getting that started. What had happened when I was at Magoo, we were developing the Bulldog. It was a laser-guided bullpup, and we were using our A4M as a project airplane for that development. Well, Mel Curry, who was then DD-R&E, says there's a proliferation of laser weapons. The Navy Marine Corps will buy the Laser Maverick. Of course, there wasn't a Laser Maverick. Says you will buy the Laser Maverick. Hughes was trying to develop a Laser Maverick. So years later, I'm a development coordinator. My admiral comes in one day and says, "Marty, you got 2 hours to put together a program for Laser Maverick and put it in the budget. So I call my contacts, Point Magoo, VX5 at Channel Lake, and say, guys, let's think about this. So in 2 hours, I put a program in a Palm, and that was the program for the Laser Maverick.
2 hours.
2
Probably
hours.
the most efficient government program.
Yeah, well, but it was fortunate that I happened to know a lot about what needed to be done. But it was I think back at that, and today the Laser Maverick is a great weapon.
And this actually, General Shepard mentioned this yesterday or a couple days ago that really sparked my thought. If I but if I went to your house right now, what mementos would I see out? Do you have a home where your wife lets you keep out a couple, wings or?
Yes, I have. If you go into the den, okay, I have a partial "I Love Me" wall with my ribbons and pictures of airplanes that I'd flown, models of airplanes I've flown, and a picture of me and my wife in my evening dress at a Marine Corps ball. So yeah, that's there.